Welcome back to The Highway with Kyle Shutt. I'm really excited about this week's episode. I normally bring on musicians or other kind of creative types, but I wanted to shine a little light on what goes on behind the scenes and bring on a journalist for you. We have this week Mr. Rob Pasbani from Metal Injection, one of the biggest heavy metal news outlets. We talked about everything from PR, record reviews, just the evolution of heavy metal journalism over the years. It was a really fun episode. As always, if you like what you hear on the program, hit that follow button, smash that subscribe tab. You do what you got to do to make sure you don't miss a single episode. And if you want to go one step further and help me keep this train rolling, you can find us at patreon.com/thehighway. For a few bucks a month, you can help me keep the lights on, get yourself a shout out on the program, get some guitar lessons from me once a month, even get some merch so you can wear me home. Anything helps, and I sincerely appreciate all of you for listening. We also have to thank our amazing sponsors, Heil Sound, because if you like the way I sound, it's because there's a Heil in front of me. Now, Rob and Metal Injection have given me so much coverage over the years, so I thought it would be nice to turn the tables. So let's do things my way.
The Highway.
Hey, Rob, what's going on?
Hey, how's it going?
Oh, my God. I don't know when this is going to air exactly, but for everyone out there listening, it's November 1st, the day after Halloween, and I thought I knew what a hangover was. This is a new level. Did you get into any shenanigans last night?
Yeah, I went to see Guar. Actually, it feels a very appropriate band to see on Halloween. I only had one drink because I was driving, so no hangover shenanigans. Maybe a weed hangover.
Yeah, smart man. You still in New York?
Yep. I am in Brooklyn, New York.
Yeah, we were just there, and I gotta say, it's the city that sleeps now. It's crazy. I've never walked around Williamsburg at 2 a.m. And it's just a ghost town. It's fucking crazy.
Yeah, the pandemic kind of, I noticed that too. Like, it would always be easy to find something good to eat late at night.
Exactly.
Now, not so much. Yeah.
It's so sad. But yeah, thanks so much for coming on, Rob Pasbani, everybody from Metal Injection. I wanted to bring a heavy metal journalist on because this podcast is all about every aspect of the entertainment industry. And journalism is one of those things that's a huge part of it, but people don't really know what goes on behind the scenes and things like that. And I just kind of wanted to pick your brain about it. So thanks for coming on.
My pleasure.
Yeah. Do you come from a journalism background or anything like that? Or was this just kind of a half-baked idea that you and some other stoners came up with to make fun of us musicians?
Yeah, more so the latter. No, I don't. I mean, I've taken journalism classes in college and whatever, but journalism wasn't really what I intended to do. I was more in the field of graphic design and web development. So it was more my interest was more in building a website, and it's just, someone had to maintain it. So I just fell into writing and I guess I've been doing it now for 17 years. So yeah, I guess I'm a journalist.
That's wild. It's evolved a lot since the days of just print media, like magazines, just running album reviews and just press agents arranging a months ahead sort of press campaign. It seems like things are a lot more immediate now, and just and I don't mean this in a negative way, but just a lot more like gossip rags. And just keeping people attention and stuff.
I feel like even in the time that I've been working in the field, it's evolved so much from kind of straight news to then when there was all the blogging stuff kind of blew up. It was more kind of people wanted more opinion in the article.
Uh-huh.
And then I kind of feel like the opinion kind of went a little too far, maybe. And also this was kind of around the time of Trump and questions about, fake news and whatever. And so then the opinion had to be kind of pulled back, and it was just well, here's just the story. You come up with your own opinion. But in terms of gossipy stuff, absolutely. I mean, look, there's plenty of hard news that we do, and then there's plenty of stuff that's pretty trivial. But the truth is, the trivial stuff gets 10 times the amount of traffic.
Absolutely.
And essentially it funds our ability to go ahead and do the real news or covering underground bands, because none of that stuff is actually paying the bills. But we still obviously feel an obligation to cover it and want to cover it.
It's difficult for bands to crack these days, and I've definitely heard bands talk about like, how come nobody's like paying attention to us? And I was like, I don't know, because you're not Kanye West having a fucking prayer meeting with Justin Bieber and Marilyn Manson, dude. I don't know what to tell
exactly.
you. Wild shit's going on out there, man.
People only have so much attention and only have so much time. And I think a big thing that changed news and journalism is Facebook. That was the biggest change, because I feel like everything is kind of like before Facebook and after Facebook. Before Facebook, people actually visited our main page. People visited websites.
Right.
People went and looked on a main page and saw what they were writing. And I feel like it was much better for bands in that sense, because then fans and readers were actually listening to tastemakers and checking out some new songs just because they were on the main page and they saw it. Now, nobody visits homepages. Everyone just gets their news through social media, through Facebook or through Twitter. And Facebook has made such a deal out of what shows up in the news feed that essentially a lot of times you're kind of writing towards what would be more likely to show up in the news feed. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, that, or even SEO, like search engine optimization, for people that like you're not even writing a story really. You're like choosing words to try to get people to like when it comes up when they search for it and shit like that. There's a real art to it.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Yeah, it's a balance of doing that stuff and then actually servicing your readers, and providing good information.
Do you find that you don't even care anymore sometimes, where you're just like, oh my, this is the story I'm running? You don't have to. I'm going to go deep here in a minute, but you don't have to answer all these if you don't want to.
Well, what I could say is there was a point, like I mentioned, there was a point where I realized personally that with some stories, I should take my opinion out of it. And like an example I'll give is a band like Five Finger Death Punch. I'm not a fan of Five Finger Death Punch. I recognize their place in the metal ecosystem. They are there to get people that aren't necessarily paying attention to the scene, just are on the radio and just need something to listen to for 20 minutes. And those people are the type of people that can be converted into, like hardcore heavy metal fans. And previously about Five Finger Death Punch, I would write about it in kind of a snarky, like, here's a new Five Finger Death Punch song to suffer through, And I would notice that the comments would be from Five Finger Death Punch fans being like, hey, this is, cruel, like, what the fuck? And I realized, like, oh, here, like, just because I don't like Five Finger Death Punch doesn't mean my readers don't like them. And it's not, it's kind of rude of me. And it's kind of dickish of me to kind of like make fun of their tastes, because like ultimately, like I don't, I'm not bothered if somebody listens to Five Finger Death Punch, and my job isn't to like mock my readers. My job is to inform the readers. So I decided at some point a few years ago, I will write about Five Finger Death Punch because it's something that our readers are interested in. And I will like abstain mostly from offering my opinion on subjective things, like new music. And it's just like, here's the new song. You tell me what you think of it. As opposed to like, here's what I think of it.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember this because all these musicians read all this shit too. And it sometimes I don't let it get under my skin as much as it used to, because there was a comment that Metal Sucks made one time that really got under my skin. And it was fucking Axl. He whenever High Country came out, it was a very divisive album, like real polarizing with our fans and stuff like that. And the first week sales were, they do a thing called like Metal by Numbers, where they just like spill everybody's beans. And it was like, here's the first week's numbers for High Country, and then like the next time they did it, it was like we had very much fallen down the charts, and it was like he wrote, here's the Swords chart position for High Country, more like Low Country. and it really fucking pissed me off. You know what I mean?
It stung.
It really did a little bit, because I was like, you know what? Fuck you, man. And I was so pissed about it. And we did we started doing like an acoustic version of High Country, and we didn't really know what we were doing. We went in, we did 2 songs real quick, and then they were so easy to do. I was like, well, what if we did like the whole album acoustic? And then like it sort of snowballed into this project. And then when it was time to name it and everything, I was like, we're calling this fucker Low Country. And so I really spun that one around. I don't think he knows that, but maybe somebody will tell him.
Well, I'll pass it along to him. I'm sure he'll be flattered by it. But that's something I realized, a few years ago as well. There was a lot of growth in doing this because, we did kind of blow up, and we are one of the top metal websites. And in my head, sometimes I forget about that. I forget about our reach, and I just assume it's like I'm writing to like a few of my friends, and sometimes I'll write something snarky, not necessarily because I mean it. It's just, oh, here's something funny I thought of. I'll write it in here. But then like I've realized, and I try to remind myself, like, how would you feel if the person you're writing about this saw this? Are you okay with them seeing this? And it's very much changed how I write, because there have been times where I've written something absentmindedly, and I feel like I've hurt somebody's feelings, and I felt really shitty about it, because it's like that joke wasn't good enough to like hurt somebody. You know what I mean? Like I like, this isn't that serious where I want to affect somebody's mood and ruin their day. And I'm very, very conscious of that nowadays.
That's funny. Have you ever straight up like printed something completely false and had to run a retraction?
Yeah. I mean, certainly it's definitely happened. It's not something I enjoy doing, but absolutely.
Yeah. So getting into that,
it's not something I would do intentionally. Like if I know a story's.
Yeah, I just want like getting into your where you like your sources. You don't have to give away your sources, obviously, but like just is it that kind of thing where you just have certain people that like feed you information or things like that, and then it just turns out
no, it's no, it's not like that necessarily. It would an example of like something that just comes to mind is just something happened. People are writing on Twitter that something happened at a show. So you kind of write from the perspective of the people on social media, but then like a video comes out or something that completely contradicts the reports on social media. So then you post a retraction, something like that. Or it's usually just somebody says something publicly and then somebody like denies with proof, that kind of thing. Not very often that. I guess sometimes there have been times where I've been misled about social media posts coming from official pages or something, like a troll tricked me, but that kind of thing. I would never, there's not really any like rumors, and that doesn't happen too often. And if it does, I always try to confirm it with other sources before.
Yeah. Well, you're one of the few. But sometimes like I'll find out about shit on Twitter just from people talking about it, and I'll just be like, okay, what the fuck are they talking about? And I'll end up having to go to a website, like a metal site, just to see if that's true. Like the Turnstile shit in the pit one. I was just like, wait a minute. They're like, all of a sudden everyone on Twitter is making jokes about taking a shit in the mosh pit. I was like, okay, something went down. I don't know. Let me go check it out. That was
well. See, that's a good point. That's where you hear the news now. You don't hear it on the websites. You hear it on social media, and then you go to the websites to kind of back up what you're hearing on social media. I'm the same way. I'm absolutely addicted to Twitter. It's a problem. I spend hours on it a day.
It never ends.
Yeah,
it's like hanging out in a coffee shop in the 90s. It's just people in there talking 24 hours a day. You're like, oh my God.
Yeah, and then you kind of fall in a thread and you get into the replies, and it's a black hole.
Well, I came from like the age of like when I graduated high school in 2000. Like the internet was barely a thing. That was I that's kind of how I got into underground music. Was like I found out about record labels doing mail order, because I couldn't really get many great records like from there were no record stores where I grew up. I couldn't get a hold of like Propaganda or anything like that without sending out through the mail. And so as these websites started popping up like Lambgoat and stonerrock.com. It just really opened up a whole world for me. But back in those days, like especially stonerrock.com, they were fucking awesome. They reported every single band, no matter how big or small you were, and it was just an honest review of the album, and it was a super simple website, and they just kept getting hacked into oblivion. And I didn't really understand that at the time. Like, why? Like, who hates this shit so much that they're like hacking and like ruining these people's like hard work and everything? And eventually, the website just went away. How is that? Anything like that ever happened to y'all, or like what are your safeguards?
Yeah, it was much harder back then, just because you had to run your own server. There wasn't all of this open source software that there is now. So I think like what, to answer your question, why would they do it? It's just when you get big enough, you start indexing on search engines and stuff, and you get on hackers' radars. And I think it's just it's really like more like for them, it's just something to hold ransom to get money for or whatever, stuff like that, or get data.
Yeah.
And sometimes you use open source software that has exploits in them, or the security is good, and then it allows people to do that. We definitely fell into those traps early on, just because also we didn't really have any money, so we would be using open source software, and I'm more of a front end developer than a back end developer, so some of it was a little over my head, and the security aspect. So you kind of leave yourself vulnerable, and it definitely led to a few stressful nights of trying to recoup stuff. But we're on a pretty stable piece of software now, WordPress, which is pretty much the standard in a lot of publishing.
Mm-hmm. That's wild. I still have no idea how any of this shit works. So it's just me asking these questions is mostly so I can understand better. So in dealing with, I just had a question because I've been running a lot of my own press lately. I've hired a lot of publicists over the years. Some were really great. Some were really, really great. Some were so great that they cost $30,000 a month, and I'm just like, whoa, what the fuck, But then I started doing it myself and just reaching out to people, and I've found that I've gotten a lot more traction just being the artist, reaching out and creating like a personal connection, kind of like with you and me right now. But how often does that happen? Like where the artist is actually the one running their own campaign versus like, do you have like a Rolodex full of press agents that you're like constantly like shuffling favors around, trying to like balance people's needs and things like that?
Yeah, absolutely. It's kind of like, it's the kind of part of the job that I didn't realize before how time consuming it is. Whereas it's very time consuming. And yeah, like I definitely have publicity contacts, people I prefer to work with, people I have to work with, and just newer people kind of learning the way and trying to help smaller bands. And I would say that for you, it's great because you the Sword have kind of an established name and you're pretty known. So for you to email direct it, you would get a response more likely than somebody in kind of a no-name band. And for like smaller bands, I would definitely suggest looking into kind of publicists. Like what I would say is think about what the sound of your band is and look up bands that are, notable, but not huge, not like Metallica level, but like out there working class bands with similar sounds to you, and look at who their publicity is and kind of reach out to those people, because they would have the contacts at the outlets that cover music similar to your sound. And it's much easier to get back to a publicist because you already have a established relationship with them than just 50 unsigned bands that hit us up with various degrees of pitches from, hey, do you want to check out my band? Like, and then there's no link. Like I have to say like, yes, send me. Like, I'm not going to respond to you begging for the link for your band. Like that's the other thing. If you can't afford the publicist and want to go the DIY route, you have to have empathy. Imagine yourself as being on the other end of what you're sending, and you have to make it as easy as possible for the writer to know what your band is about and listen to your music without attaching anything, without having to download anything, just one click and it's streaming, I think that's very important.
Absolutely. And timing is everything too.
Yes.
I've definitely done some research, and I've done my own research, and I've found that Friday obviously is just a horrible day to announce anything, but so many bands try to announce things on Fridays, and Monday can be really tough too. I found that right in the middle of the week, Wednesday, that's kind of when this podcast airs, and just it's kind of like the perfect time because all the big shit's been announced already, and everyone's saving their big ammo for the Friday announce. Because that's when records come out now. Thank you, Taylor Swift. And so that's right in the middle is perfect. But you guys are constantly running stories every day. Do you find yourselves having to save certain stories for certain times and things like that because you really need that granular data to just pop for that one story or something like that?
That's a good point. Yeah, I will say Fridays are a mess. It's just Fridays are release day now. It's album release day, single release day. So yeah, there's a lot of competition. And I would even say Thursdays now are getting pretty busy just because it's people want to get a head start on the Friday rush.
Yeah.
So you're right. Wednesday and Tuesday even are the best days for smaller bands because it is a bit slower at the beginning of the week. Monday is kind of difficult just because it's it's the first day of the week. Everyone's kind of catching up on the weekend. And so, yeah, I agree. And as for holding stories, not really. There's always so much going on. I guess sometimes there's slower periods than not. There are, kind of stories that we have that are not really time sensitive and they're more either opinion based or just lists about general music interests that we might hold on to them until there's a slower day. There's nothing going on. Let's post, 10 reasons for this or whatever.
Yeah.
Or a retrospective. Yeah. So we kind of hold those editorials, but news stories, we try to get them up as soon as possible.
Yeah. And getting back to that, just if anyone didn't know what my Taylor Swift comment was about, because I very much benefited from this. So records used to come out on Tuesdays. It was that way since the fucking 60s. I don't know. And so as streaming services and things were starting to rear their heads, and as a lot of smaller labels started dying out, and you really had your big three Sony and Capitol, or Capitol might have even been gone by 2012. But basically
Sony, Warner, and BMG.
Yeah. And so if
Universal, Sony, Warner, Universal.
Yeah. And if you're a label like Sony, you've got 300 bands or whatever like that, but really you've only got one, or two. You've got your Katy Perry, you've got your Taylor Swift, and they have to sell 10 million records or you're fucked. And so they came up with this scheme for her to have a number one record, and it was to shift the release day that week of her album release to a Friday instead of Tuesday, so that she would have an extra weekend worth of sales to ensure that she got the number one record. Which she did, but it also meant that Apocryphon came out that same day, and that was our highest debut on the Billboard Top 200. We debuted at number 17 because Taylor Swift's label decided to throw the music industry upside down. So I owe her a drink.
I don't think it was just that though. By the way, I think there was another reason.
What?
Because albums would come out on Tuesdays here, but what would happen in the UK and in Europe is people would get the US imports as opposed to buying the UK version or the European version. So in Europe, the labels, and in the UK, the labels kind of decided to, hey, if we release a few days earlier on Friday, people will be more interested in getting the localized version than the import. And as streaming and all this and internet proliferation happened, it would just lead to 4 days of leaks. The album would be out in Europe, someone would just upload it, and all the US wouldn't be able to get it. So I think that was more the reason, but it's probably a combination of the two. I'm sure they've been wanting to do it for a while, and then Taylor Swift was like, F this, we're doing it now. And then they're like, all right, I guess we're doing it.
Must be nice to have that kind of power. Oh my God. What also, as those localized versions are so funny because as a band, you create an album and you love your songs and you worked really hard, and then you have this many songs and your album's done, and then you want to put it out in Japan, and the Japanese record label's like, we need more songs. You can't just put out because they want the Japanese public to buy the Japanese version of the record, not the U.S. import, everything like that. So then you're like, well, I can't just like write more songs right now. We kind of like did the whole record. It's just kind of, I think it's funny. We've never really been the kind of band to end up with like 5 extra B-sides at the end of a session,
Yeah, I've never understood that either. Like, oh, hey, we wrote 20 songs, 12 will end up on the album, and then, these 8 songs we'll give to various countries. It's like, how do you decide which of your babies, everyone doesn't hear?
It's weird.
I never understood it.
But yeah, we don't even have to worry about that now. Nobody buys fucking CDs anymore. It all just goes up on Spotify every Friday. I used to really I wouldn't get mad about it or whatever, but it was just people were complaining about it. I see how much money we're getting from streams, and it's far less than album sales. But you gotta, you gotta evolve with the times, and I found that it's actually a very good thing if we're already an established band. So, like, say like a band like the Rolling Stones, they've already made their millions. And over the years, but then all of a sudden this new technology comes out, and even though it's not, even though it's a fraction of the money that you would normally get, they're getting double paid for all this shit. So if
it's a new contract.
Paint It Black fucking does 100 million streams, so that's $16,000 per million. So that's, you just made like $160 million on stuff that you've already been paid for. But and even the Sword, like we if it wasn't for I hope I'm not oversharing, but if it wasn't for Spotify, we probably wouldn't have recouped our first record contract, and now it's like in a much better position because of that. So I don't like to demonize anything, but as far as record sales go, it would be cool if everybody bought the record and listened to it on the streaming service. So it would be like, but it's the fact that the streaming service replaced the record purchase is kind of like where a lot of newer bands are really up a creek, and I don't really have any advice for them except you have to be excellent. You have to just constantly
stand out.
You have to constantly stand out, do something nobody's ever done before, and that's getting harder and harder to do these days. King Buffalo is one of the ones that I feel like is really standing out right now. They recorded 3 records over the pandemic, and the second one was a live album recorded in a cave, which is a horrible idea.
Whoa.
Yeah, I know, but it's a beautiful. They filmed the whole thing, and it looks absolutely gorgeous. So I was just like, see, these are the guys that are doing it. And every time they put out a record pressing, it sells out in like 20 seconds. Those guys are killing it right now.
That's really interesting.
I know.
Yeah,
and
I guess
it's
there's ways to make it work.
You got to stand out. Yeah, and have you noticed that bigger bands are because a lot of the bigger bands they used to only put a record out every 4 years. That was kind of the thing, like your Radiohead or your Metallica or something like that. I feel like it's getting longer and longer now.
It's weird. It depends on the bands. I feel there's a good amount of bands that are kind of like on this 2-year cycle, which I don't understand. Like, how you're just going to run out of material. But yeah, there are some bands that they're in no rush. I guess it really, and I've also noticed that a lot of bands are more open to just releasing singles or small little EPs. Like you said, nobody actually buys the physical albums anymore. So if you're looking for some press, why not just put a song out, get it going, and you could use it to promote a tour or just jumpstart publicity, or jumpstart your narrative. I think because of the lack of record sales, it kind of allows bands to be more creative with their releases. Why do you have to sit? I feel the other thing too is that I kind of sit with an album much less now. Like I almost forget about an album a few weeks after it comes out, unless it like really strikes me. It's like, and some of these albums that came out in this last year, it's like these are albums that I've really been looking forward to, and then I just listen to it. I'm like, because there's just so much. So I feel like for some bands, they realize like, hey, why are we putting all of this effort, all of our sweat and tears into writing 9 tracks when it's just going to be forgotten about in a month? If I just put out 2 tracks, it'll last with people, and then maybe in another 6 or 8 months, put out another 2 track. Kind of slow down the release schedule so people have more time to consume it, because there's just so much choice now. There's so much to listen to.
Yeah, and you get to run more stories too. That's kind of the
yeah, exactly. That's a great point.
Yeah, just to keep people's
get more publicity.
Attention. Yeah, and that's fucking tough to do these days, man.
Absolutely. That's another reason to do it. and it gives us something to write about. You know, we're not going to write about track 7 on your album, but if you split your album into like 3 EPs, that track 7 becomes track 2, and it will be written about. You know,
as far as like opinion pieces go, and as you see them going, I've found myself sort of indulging a little bit more when it's a very specific thing. It'll be like the top 50 albums from 1998. And I was like, that was my heyday, man. I'm fucking I want to read what they think the top 50 albums of 1998 were. I'll click on it, and there will be like 47 of them I've never heard of. And I'll be like, what was I doing back then? What the hell, man? So I really enjoy reading things like that. But then every once in a while you read one and you're like, this is wrong. And I guess that's the point, because it just keeps people reading. Did you happen to peruse the Rolling Stones 500 greatest records of all time recently?
I did see that. I always again, being a publisher, I realize like none of that stuff matters.
Totally, it's complete garbage.
It's just they need an excuse to run content. You know, like, hey, this will get people, like, it'll get people just as upset as I'm sure you would have gotten reading it. Yeah, I don't like read. That's the thing. It's who's going to read 500 blurbs? You know, you just kind of scroll through it and see where your favorites are, and kind of either have a visceral reaction like "How dare you?" or just like, all right.
I was just gonna say, because 500 little listicle article, whatever things you have to write. That's a lot. That's a whole lot, man.
Imagine, assume it's like, let's say, 75 words. That's 37,000 words. No one's going to read it. No one's going to read that.
I know.
So yeah, it's just, look, it's a business. It's all about getting those ads loaded, or I guess with Rolling Stone now, it's selling web subscriptions because they have a paywall, and stuff like that really works. Like people like subjective lists where they could critique the person's opinion,
But also, it is a business, because the journalist needs to get paid. I mean, it's evolved far from a blog. And that being said, I kind of wanted to get into this. That's when people sell their whole website. You know what I mean? And that's kind of like you put in all this work and get up to a certain point where I'm sure you're getting offers like, I don't know if a lot of people know this, but I'm going to go ahead and spill the beans. I don't care. Hard Times recently sold out. A lot of that whole group did. And I've definitely noticed a slight decline in the content coming out, and where you can tell like, I can tell the interns wrote this one, and stuff like that. And it's just, I think it's unfortunate in some way if you're a real fan of that kind of stuff, but at the same time, like, I'm really happy that if anyone is successful and gets paid for their hard work. But yeah, what do you think the future of this is going? Because like, if the news outlets start like kind of like selling out one by one, and then pretty soon iHeartRadio is going to own everything, it's all just going to be the same stories over and over again. Like, where do you think it's going?
I honestly wonder the same thing, where it's going. It's very hard to predict. The internet is like, every year it's a totally different thing. Like what we're doing this year is totally different than what we did 3 years ago, than what we did 5 years ago. You kind of don't know. It's hard to predict. And like, what I want to say also with the Hard Times is, I think for them, it's just they grew to a point where it was unsustainable to not have any backing to be able to pay their writers and offer them benefits and all that stuff. So eventually you kind of hit that point. And where it's going, I think there's always going to be independent journalism. There's always going to be people launching a blog spot or a Substack or whatever. And there will always be great writing about heavy metal. And then there'll be like more mainstream writing. I don't think necessarily if there's corporate backing, it would kind of affect stuff. It might even make it better just because there's budgets to do things, like in general, metal, I feel, I think with you guys are very lucky because you could be in the metal world and the stoner rock, or like just the greater hard rock world. I think that's very important because I feel like metal itself, I don't think people in the metal scene realize how small it is, and how maybe sometimes people are a little elitist and don't realize that, like, I don't know, even something as silly as MGK putting out a pop punk album, how that's actually helpful to metal, because it's going to introduce all these kids who are curious about music but aren't like really diehard about it. They're introduced into the sound, and not all of them are going to explore, but maybe if 5% go down the rabbit hole and check out, classic punk and hardcore and maybe some metal, and that person's going to be a lifer. It's kind of weird to say, but it's like, that's a customer for life, and I feel like with metal, we're so sometimes up our own asses about not being posers or whatever, or, that's not true, that you kind of miss the grander picture, which is like, for the scene to thrive, like there has to be a regeneration of fans. Like younger fans have to come in, and we have to get exposure in the mainstream. Look at artists like you guys, for example. You guys came in at a time when MTV was paying attention to rock and metal, and like you guys got airplay on all those channels. And I feel like you're still benefiting from that airplay to this day, even though it's probably been over a decade since MTV played you guys.
That, or even like Guitar Hero and like licensing and things like that. That was huge for us too. Just like kind of getting into that, and I see things like that like drying up for bands. It's tough. Yes,
that's a great point. Guitar Hero was huge for our scene, I think, because like it gave so many people, like you said, that new revenue stream that wasn't there before. Like you guys, and I know, like for example, Dragon Force had made their career. They're going to be set for life just off of that. We need stuff like that. I agree.
I don't know where it's going. I'm scared, Rob.
I'm scared too. I honestly, and also just with how much control Facebook has over the internet and over what they decide to show, you got to go with the flow. You got to constantly readjust to like how they're doing their business.
Mm-hmm. Well, man, I really appreciate you sitting down and just kind of pulling back the curtain a little bit, because it's a mysterious realm, the journalism and stuff like that. And I just wanted to shed some light on some of this stuff. So thank you very much, man. I really appreciate your candid opinions.
It was an absolute pleasure. I have so much respect for you, Kyle, and I love how you kind of have your hand in everything and try to do all these different things. It's very inspirational. And
thank you very much. I appreciate that. So I usually ask my musical guests if they want to play a song at the end of it. I know you're not necessarily in a band. Or are you in a band? Do you
I am not in a band. I have no musical talent.
Do you rap? You don't have to have any talent to rap these days. Oh. I'm taking that out. No.
I mean, anybody can rap. It won't be good.
Yep. Yep. But
I cannot rap though. I'm sorry. I do not have a freestyle flow.
But do you want to drop a song, like anything cool that you want to throw one of your publicist friends a bone? Throw their band's song on here. Anything you want, man. Your latest favorite track. I'll put a goddamn.
Well, I will say, like, I've been kind of. I do not want to do a Machine Gun Kelly track. I'll do something a little like not quite metal. It's my friend's band. They're called Nightclub. It's a duo. They're kind of goth pop or death pop. I don't know.
Fuck yeah.
It's like dark pop. And let me see the song. Let's do Freak Like Me. I'm going to do Nightclub, Freak Like Me.
I love it. Thank you so much, Rob.
Thank you.
All right, man. I think we're going to be back in New York probably next summer. I'll send you a line. Let's hang out. I think we'll actually be able to.
Absolutely. Yeah. I'll roll a dube and we could actually split it and not be afraid of catching something.
Yes.
me. You know you want to be a freak like me. You know you want to be freak.
You know you want to be
A freak like me.
You know you want to be
A freak like me.
You know you want to be
A freak like me.
You know you want to be
A freak like me.
Thanks so much for tuning into The Highway this week. A big shout out to Reverend Guitars, Railhammer Pickups, and Earthquaker Devices. If you liked what you heard, you can follow where you can follow, subscribe where you can subscribe, and if you want to go one step further, you can support us on Patreon at The Highway with Kyle Shutt. For a few bucks a month, you can help us keep this party going, get early access to next week's episode,